Most all of us make New Year's resolutions, and on this channel, I want to run some numbers for you, just to encourage you to consider saving for your retirement. And on this channel, we think it's reasonable to believe the next decades will follow the same economic cycles of the last 100 years. In other words, the coming decades will continue to have their ups and downs, but will be no worse or better than those of the last 100 years. Like I said here, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just someone who loves numbers and history. And what I want to show people is just where they might be uh, in the coming decades, looking at the data from the last 100 years, realizing that none of these are going to be exact. And in all probability, they're going to not be any worse than the Depression years and not any better than the 80s and 90s. So we basically run numbers with that in mind. So let's just take somebody who has, let's say you're going to save $250 a month and you plan on increasing that by 2% a year because you are going to get raises. So you go from 250, 255, 260, and so on. Let's run the numbers. The numbers showing right here are from 1923. And I want you to notice if you've got 30 or 35 years, if you're in your 20s or early 30s, you can accumulate quite a lump sum over a long period of time, up to 1.206 million in 1924. But I want to update it for all these numbers for the 30, 35, and 40-year columns. Hopefully this encourages you to get saving for your retirement if you haven't done so, and if you have started doing that, keep it up. But here are the actual numbers for the last 100 years. I like to look at the 35-year column. In the worst case scenario in the last 100 years, you would have $855,000 with this scenario, $250 a month, increasing it by 2% a year. Let's just say maybe you've already got a little bit started. Let's say you've got 10,000 in there. We can run all kinds of numbers here. I just love doing this. And let's say it's kind of tough to increase it right now. You're just going to stay at 0%. Let's see where you might be in that scenario. Again, we're going to get a range. This range is going to be $1,000,000. Look at how much difference that $10,000 made, even though we're not even giving ourselves increase. All of a sudden, the minimum in this column you're going to see is $1,000,000. The median 1.44. You could have as much as $2.951 million with this simple scenario, $250 a month. If you've already got $10,000 working for you in the next 35 and 40 years, if you're in your 20s and have saved 10,000, congratulations. Look where you'd be after 40 years. In the worst case scenario, 1.579, the median being 2.560. And if you caught a good stretch in the next 40 years, you'd have 4.541. Again, we're looking at the numbers right here, assuming that you're going to be somewhere in here. You may be starting right here for the next 35 or 40 years. You can be catching these down years, catching 73 and 74 down, but you're going to catch a lot of the good years. Again, the range is showing you no matter where you start here, the absolute minimum you would have with this scenario, starting with 10,000 and saving $250 a month. We can run these. Let's go ahead and increase this by 3% a year because most people get raises in somewhere in the neighborhood of 3% inflation. So let's say they go up. Well, some of you have said that's too high. So let's go with 2%. Again, the same scenario, start with 10,000, $250 a month. In the worst case scenario, in the last 30, 35, and 40 years, or for 30, 35, and 40 years, over the last 100 years, over 30 years, you have 597 in the worst case, a median being 965. But look at this, 1.147. That's why we call our channel $1,000,000 Made Easy, trying to encourage you that it doesn't take that much to reach $1,000,000 if you have the time, if you have the 35 or 40 years especially. I've run numbers in other videos for those of you that are on a shorter time span, but obviously you're probably going to have more for your beginning balance also. So hopefully these numbers make sense to you. Consider subscribing to $1,000,000 Made Easy. Make this a priority in the coming year to try to get your savings up there as much as you possibly can. I can run any numbers you want, and you see the potential of what the S&P 500 can do for you if it does anything like it's done in the last 100 years. And we believe it's not going to be any worse or any better than the last 100 years for any of these periods. Please consider subscribing. Tell your friends about these numbers. Put any numbers you want me to run for you, depending on what age you want. It doesn't really matter if you're 25 or 45. Let me know the numbers you want me to run, where you're at, and what numbers you want me to run it at. Uh, Thanks for watching.